No one knows what the shelf life is of a creator.
No.
It could be a year, 2 years, 10 years. No one knows.
We're starting to see AI influencers appearing and things like that. I mean, it's going to get. I mean, the whole thing is an absolute minefield, and I hope I'm in a box long before any of that comes across my desk, type thing. I've got no interest in being a celebrity or an influencer. I'm remarkably middle-aged to middle age.
Today we have a very special guest, one of the people that I admire extremely, Alex Payne. Welcome to the podcast.
Nice to see you. Thank you very much for having us.
No, thank you for coming on. As I was saying just before this, I'm a huge rugby fan, but I'm also a huge fan of the work you do outside of rugby, which I really want to touch on. So I thought it'd be great to have a conversation about rugby, about business, about influencer marketing, and all of the above, really.
Fire away. Let's get into it.
But first things first, am I right in saying one of your first jobs was at IMG?
God, yeah, wow, you have delved back into the archives.
Went on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I did one of those summer internships, which would have been back in, God, it would have been about 2001, 2002, something like that. And yeah, so I had a very sort of, like most people do at a relatively young age, I was trying to sort of work out what I wanted to do. I looked to go into the army. I was potentially going to go into marketing. I actually really wanted to be a sculptor for a while, but my sort of one true love throughout my childhood was always sport, any type of sport, all types of, kicking balls, hitting balls, etc. And I ended up sort of beginning to start making some inroads into seeing what a career in the sports industry might look like. So I went and did some stuff at Bath. I applied to Sky actually when I was about 20, and they said, come back when you've actually done something in the industry. And then I did one of these summer internships with IMG, which is a 2-month sort of summer holiday job, basically. I think we paid like 25 quid a day or something like that. Oh, and it was eye-opening in a number of different ways. But the bits I remember, I made some very good friends doing it. IMG at the time were the poster agency in that kind of world. We had breakfast with Mark McCormack, who was the kind of the grandfather of sports marketing.
They're
so to
still
speak.
huge.
Oh, absolutely enormous, and TWI are phenomenal. McCormack was a fascinating character. He was really shrewd and savvy. He actually died, I think, about 18 months after the internship. So he died very shortly afterwards. But he was the guy who, I think it was with Arnold Palmer. Arnold Palmer won the US Open and they gave him a bottle of champagne with Moet on it. And McCormack was mates with him and said, turn the champagne around. So you're not endorsing Moet. If Moet want to be in your hands, they're going to have to pay you. And from that, the whole kind of sports industry kind of started, really, I think. That's what they say. So, yeah, amazing. And I sort of crossed paths with loads of people who I met at that point of my career on numerous sort of times over the years since in various different guises. But it's a hell of an agency, and it was an amazing place to work for a couple of months.
So was it talent management based?
No, I actually ended up working in... So I think they took about 30 of us, funnily enough, and... I had a good mate from school who did it. Zoe Jordan did it, who's Eddie Jordan's daughter. So I think she went off into the fashion world. Bizarrely, there's a very good mate of my son's now at school, and her mum was on it. I think his mum was on it, and things like that. So, it was a good collection of people who've gone off to do very interesting things off the back of it. She runs a charity in India, actually. I actually ended up working, I think, in the television arm of it, TWI, and I was working on what would have been I think it was the 2015, World Cup bid or something like that. And they knew I was relatively interested in rugby, and there was all sorts of bits and bobs going on. But yeah, I was getting out. I can't actually remember what we did. It was getting out and about and trying to help sell television programs and pulling together promos and things like that. It was quite television based at the time.
So how did journalism and punditry come about then?
Well, so that is a very good question. It kind of... I always say I was very, very lucky to get where I've got to, and I'm very fortunate when I was about 10 or 11. I used to watch a lot of. It was a program called Rugby Special. It was on every Sunday night. Followed Ski Sunday. It was a sort of religion for me back in the pre-satellite days, and I used to watch it religiously. Very, very big into the sport. Had all my heroes played rugby, and I will never forget lying on a beanbag watching the program. My mum walked in one Sunday and said, "Look, you're going to have to find something else to do because you're never going to have a career watching rugby." And I have reminded her of that numerous times, how wrong she could be. So I ended up in sort of, as I said, looking at the sports industry as a whole. And I went to work for some very big agencies like IMG. I went to work for some very little ones at the time, like Benchmark Sport, who were brilliant. They were operating in a Muse office off Charlotte Street. And I can't remember what it was that I had lined up. I had 2 weeks work experience lined up somewhere, and it fell through on the Monday morning, the first morning. And so I literally got out what was, at the time, the blue Thompson telephone directory. How old are you?
28.
So you wouldn't even know this. It's so depressing for someone as old as me. But I ended up getting the Thompson telephone directory out, and I rang through sports marketing agencies. And I picked up the phone and I said, look, hello, I'm keen, I'm eager. I've got 2 weeks starting now. Can I come and do the photocopying? And I got from A to B, and I got to B for Benchmark. And they said, I got through to the MD, and he said, do you bat or bowl? And I said, well, I'm pretty average at both, but I'd probably bat. He goes, right, you've got an interview here at 2:00, bring a bat. And so I got on the tube and I went to Charlotte Street and I took a bat. And I think they had like 6 or 7 people, but all of the office bowled at me while asking me questions. And they said, brilliant, we'll see you back here tomorrow. You're on tea and coffee and photocopying duty. And I hoiked the ball out of the Muse. And so that ended the interview. But it was just brilliant. It was a very, I sound unbelievably old saying it. It was a very, I was going to say different era, but that makes me sound 100. It was just, it was much more kind of sparky and spontaneous, I think. There were far less worries in the world and processes and all that kind of thing. They didn't know me from Adam, and they said, bro, see you tomorrow. Yeah. Whereas now there are hoops and loops and all sorts of things to jump through. So anyway, I did a lot of work experience. I ended up writing to Sky and saying, can I come and make the tea and coffee? They said, no, go and do some other bits. So I built a bit of a CV, and then they said, yes, come on in. And I started, again, just doing work experience. I worked on Soccer AM in the glory days, which was a hell of a show and an amazing kind of education. My love was always rugby. I ended up working my way into the rugby department.
Yeah, because am I right in saying you did things like dart? You did other stuff?
Yeah, I did darts. The first thing I ever did actually was Fishomania with Eddie Hearn.
Yeah.
And we had Eddie on our podcast the other day, and it's extraordinary how big the sports industry is and yet how small it is at the same time. So I've known Eddie for 20 odd years now, and I did Fishomania with him and then poker. And he's gone on to slightly more impressive things than I have in the ensuing time. But the way the journalism began actually was that they knew I was very keen and they knew I knew my stuff. I'd never done any public speaking, debating or training or anything like that. And one day, it was a Friday night, I'll never forget it. And I was keen and eager, and I was in the right place. And one Friday night, the executive producer, who's an absolute wizard, a proper sort of doyen of television, yelled across the office and said, we haven't got a reporter for the Army-Navy game tomorrow, which is 82,000 at Twickenham, but it's sort of, it's lower level in terms of the big games. We haven't got a reporter who wants to do it. And I said, probably, and he said, yeah, great, you're doing it. So I went home at 7:00 at night on the Friday. I was back at Twickenham at 10 a.m. on the Saturday. And by 12:00, I was live on air reporting into and I hadn't done a minute's training. Really? And you just wouldn't get that now. And
oh no, you'd have to go through all the training.
Yeah, exactly.
All the media work.
Yeah. They what they did is they took a kid who worked very hard to be in the right place at the right time, but knew nothing, and said, right, we'll train you up. And it was pre-social media.
So how old were you at this point?
I would have been 24.
Wow, that's young.
Yeah, and actually I was 24 and I looked about 10. I mean, I moisturise twice daily now, trying to remain looking young, but I look very, very young. And I don't know whether this is a sort of podcast where you can use this type of analogy, but I always say the early years of my broadcasting career was a bit like an unflushable turd, which is that I just wouldn't go away, but that you sort of, you get the analogy. And I sort of hung around long enough that eventually it began to get a little bit better. And then so that would have been September, and then by the following June I was reporting on a Lions tour in New Zealand, and so it just took off really quick. Yeah, very, very quick.
Now, is that because they didn't have how do I put this? Did they not have a lot?
Anyone better.
Basically, did they not have a lot of pundits at that time?
No, they did. I got
impressed.
very, very lucky.
Yeah.
So I keep saying I got very, very lucky, but I believe very strongly that you have to be in the right place at the right time to be lucky. And you've got to work very hard to get into that spot, and then
you got to be ready to take a chance. Yeah.
So the reason I ended up on that Lions story is there were two far more senior reporters than I was. But one of them didn't want to do a 13-week tour to New Zealand because he had family commitments. And another one who was slightly younger had a child who very sadly wasn't very well. And so I would never have got anywhere near it. But circumstance suddenly meant, well, these two can't do it all. Therefore, you're off. And so, I literally packed my bags with 6 months experience. And for me, the Lions is always the most special thing in rugby and one of the most special things in sport. And I was totally and utterly out of my depth, like horrendously out of my depth. And it was the 2005 tour, which was been way before your time, but it was toxic.
I
remember
it. Yeah,
oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a horrible tour.
It was the one that Dan Carter just ripped
Dan Carter was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But Alistair Campbell was part of the Lions media team. The whole thing fell apart at the seams. And I was a 25-year-old, very, very wet behind the ears reporter, trying very hard to hang on to the story. And you learn very, very quickly. I can remember Campbell taking me aside. I sort of mentioned this before, at one of the press conferences, I think in Dunedin, and he leant over and he said, "Look, Alex, could you do me a favour? I'd love you to ask a question to the top table during the conference as to why we're here in Dunedin."
Yeah.
And I said, "Yes, of course, Alistair." And so halfway through the sort of presser, I put my hand up and I said, "Sir Ian McGeechan, could you tell us why we're all here in Dunedin?" And he said, "Well, yes, thank you, Alex. We're here because we're doing a community initiative and blah, blah, blah." He sort of trotted out this, what was attempted a sort of PR, goodwill, let's get everybody on side message. And every single journalist, and there's some proper wizened old hacks in there, put their pen down and turned around and sort of stared with a look of utter disgust that someone should sort of corrupt their press conference in such a way. And I think I lost the trust of the written media for probably the remainder of my career. But it just was, you wouldn't get many people starting their careers now in the way that I was very fortunate to. And I came back from the Lions tour, I got thrown onto Sky Sports News. Again, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. You couldn't do it now, and you wouldn't do it now, because the amount of mistakes that I made, you would just be butchered by social media. You'd be a meme and a parody. We've all had those moments.
The brain just switched off, and everyone was like,
that wasn't even that actually. The one you're referring to was, and I was working with him that day for Sky. You get your. It's like occasionally, if the sound people in the trucks aren't doing their job properly, you end up getting yourself on a 1.5 second delay, and it's the most discombobulating thing you will ever come across. You honestly think you're having a stroke. I had something very, very similar.
That's what you did look like.
And so you're hearing yourself, but it's impossible to deal with. And if you've done loads of television, you take one ear off and you get your bearings back.
Yeah.
But he didn't know what he was talking about. He didn't know what was going on, and he ended up sort of going viral. I mean, going across the world. And that's the extraordinary thing now, is that I had a very, very similar incident. I mean, appallingly embarrassing. And I've done probably 20,000 hours of live television. I've covered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of international test matches. And all anybody says is what happened to you at the Bath Wasps game in whatever it was, 2013, I think it was. And I just got my sound went. And I will never forget, it's like Jean van der Velde, who was the man who was leading the Open by 7 shots walking down the 18th and ended up losing it. Put it in the bunker and then put it in the stream and put it back in the bunker, and the whole thing imploded. It's amazing now that if you want to get, it probably leads into influencer marketing actually. If you want to go viral, if you do something spectacularly badly, you can be across the world before you know it. And so I'm very glad that the beginning of my career was pre-social media, etc., because I'd never have survived in this day.
That's very interesting that now you've got a social media based agency then.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the two are intrinsically linked, because what we've built with Room Unlocked is it's a solution to the problem that I saw.
Tell me about that story of how it came about, because I've read about it.
Yeah, so it's the whole reason actually for looking at other things to do. When I started presenting, I was working on Sky Sports News, and I would be going into work at 6 p.m. and I'd be coming off air at midnight. So you do the 6 till 12 shift. And so I would have been 25, and I had Monday to Fridays free. I had a couple of mates who weren't really working, and so I'd play a bit of tennis with them, and then I'd go to the golf range, and then I'd have a cup of coffee, and might go for a haircut. And after about 6 months, you get incredibly bored. And all of my friends were off doing interesting things, and they were at the bottom of their ladders, etc. And so I thought, I've got to find something a bit more to do. And so I started various companies in an attempt to sort of fill my days a bit more productively. And I had a surf label for a bit, and I had a digital publishing company. I've done presentation coaching and all sorts of other bits and bobs. But the reason for Room Unlocked came about because, and I've got no interest in being a celebrity or an influencer. I'm remarkably middle lane to middle age, and I don't really do very much online. But I used to get, and I still do occasionally, I get brands who would either slide into my DMs and say, can we throw it? So in the last 3 months, I've had 2 examples. I've had a fabulous looking women's athletic wear brand who keep coming up in my DMs saying, we'd love to send you our latest sports bra. We think you'd be a great brand ambassador. And it's 2023, anything goes. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm also kind of a bit like, guys, you've got to be, I'm 43, I'm washed up, I'm over the hill.
Somebody's not doing their research.
Somebody's not doing that. Somebody's just pressing a button and copy and paste. And then I had another one very, very recently from a beef jerky company in Dallas that said, we'd love to send you 3 packets of our beef jerky and we'll pay you $50 to put it on your Instagram. You look perfect for us. And I'm like, again, guys, if you're trying to advertise your beef jerky from Dallas via a bloke who lives in Shepherd's Bush and is somebody. So there are people out there doing it very, very well, but there are people out there doing it very, very badly. And what we've built with Room Unlocked came back from one of these things that I got thrown, which was a box with about 500 quid's worth of Star Wars merchandise in it. You'll know it better than I will, but books, games, DVDs, TV controls, all that sort of stuff. And a very nice note, and they said, Alex, we hope you love all of this. If you do, we'd love you to tweet about the fact that we are showing Star Wars back-to-back on our movie channel all weekend. Classic promo box. Every brand in the world is trying to get them out of the front door. What they want is social media. Again, every brand is hunting exposure online. And yet they had used an agency who'd crunched data and sweated their network, and they tried all sorts of routes to give these 100 boxes out, one of which came to yours truly, who's got absolutely no interest in Star Wars whatsoever. I haven't seen it since I was 8. No interest in watching Star Wars a weekend. I don't really want the box on my desk. And for some unknown reason, I can't really begin to tell you why I did it, I sent this really half-assed, half-baked tweet saying, you can watch Star Wars this weekend.
Oh, so you did it?
So I did the tweet. Wow. And I don't really know why. I'd never do.
Yeah.
But it got absolutely no engagement at all. I don't get very much engagement anyway, but it got absolutely no engagement.
Yeah.
And so what I was left with at the end of this absolute mess is the most successful movie franchise in history have come up with a really good idea. They know what they want from it. They've spent time, money, and effort on it. They've burnt their agency hours on it. And they are getting the square root of nothing back for all of that energy. Why are they not able to find 100 people at the click of a button who have got an engaged audience, who love the films, who want the box and create the content because it's something they believe in and they're interested in? And that's essentially the platform that we've built. So instead of Star Wars running around headlessly and going, you, here's a box, do something with it, you put essentially an offer, we call it an opportunity up on the platform. Hello, we're Star Wars. We've got really cool limited edition Star Wars merchandise. Yeah. And we're looking for people who love the films, want the box, and will happily talk about our viewings next weekend. And it goes onto one side of the marketplace. And on the other side, income, what we term pre-vetted people of influence. Yeah. So we're not just about people who pose against a brick wall with 100,000. We're people with strong opinions and people who achieve a lot.
But with some kind of following.
97% of the membership that we've got have got a strong social media presence. I'll give you some examples of others who don't in a minute, because actually it's really interesting. But when they're on the inside, they are able to then send Star Wars a message saying, I love it, send it my way, and I'll put it on my Instagram. Or my son is obsessed with Star Wars right now, please send it our way. We'll do a lovely YouTube video and he'll be absolutely delighted. We'll talk about the viewings. Or you might get a radio DJ who says, you know what, I've got a 2-hour show on Friday, ping me 3 of those, I'll use them as competition prizes, and I will talk about the fact that you can watch the films at the weekend. So what you get as a brand are people coming to you saying, I love it, I need it, I want it, and I will talk about it because it's interesting to me. And what you get as a sort of a person of influence is the opportunity to connect with the brands over the things you love. And we will both know now that it's absolutely right, 100% correct, to pay the right person to be the face of your brand. And for that, you'll get the control of message and their time, and you'll be able to work with them on what it is that you're looking for. But I also fundamentally believe there are too many brands paying too much money to too many people to talk about them. Yeah. And there is a way now, and what we're trying to sort of help brands understand, is that if you connect with the people who love your brand and you reward their fandom and you build their love of your brand, they actually will give you often far more than you'll get just by paying one of the wrong people to talk about you. Yeah. So if I say to you, I'll give you 1,000 quid for a post, you'll stick up a post. If I say to you, if you really love my brand, here's a whole load of opportunities, you talk about it far more authentically, far more regularly, far more in the stories that you're telling, which I think places it more naturally. And so what we've built, we think, is a really powerful layer of amplification for whatever a brand is doing. Go and find the right person, work with them, have a really strong relationship with them, but unlock the people who love you as well, because they will take you to more places with more sort of relevancy, more interesting potential opportunities than just you trolling through and pinging people DMs.
Do the brands pay you, because I'm trying to figure out the business model, so do the brands pay you a retainer of sorts?
More of a subscription, So they can either come on and buy a single, or they can take it all the way up to a sort of an annual subscription where they can do as much as they like.
Got you. Okay. So there's no money transaction between the brand and the creator. No. How does that work from a disclosure point of view?
So that is a very good question. We talk to the ASA regularly because originally the guidelines from the ASA were, if you control message or money is exchanged or there's control of content, then that has to be hashtag ad. We are not any of those things. There's no money, there's no control of content. It's giving you and go forth and get it. So it was hashtag gifted.
So there's no direction. So I'm just trying to. So there's no direction in terms of you have to post this many posts.
You can do that, but as soon as you do that, you're straying more into the short answer to your question is that it won't be very long until every collaboration, gifted or paid, is hashtag ad. We have had there are nuances that have meant we've allowed our clients our creators to go with hashtag gifted, but the landscape it changes all the time. We educate our members on, we've got some notice boards and notifications that we can send them on what the latest guidelines are. We've got some brands like alcohol brands who are absolutely adamant that everything has to be hashtag ad, and we've got more challenger brands who go, do you know what, I'm just going to give it to you, you go have fun, and we don't think that sits in the ASA. So I think we'll all end up in the hashtag ad, hashtag gifted. The other thing that we do encourage our members to do is to have very clear declarations in what they post. And I think you can talk very openly and transparently, which is, I'm working with this brand, I'm trying it, I love it, I've always been a fan of, I'm really grateful for type thing. Which
That's gives the important bit as well, is making sure that the audience know why they're doing it and not trying to trick people.
Absolutely,
Have you ever thought about introducing a paid element to it?
That is really interesting, and it's very topical, because the answer to your question is yes. We've actually got certain clients of ours, sort of our bigger clients, who every so often will say, we love what you do, but actually we've got a specific need for this. So O2 would be a very good example. They give out gig tickets and England rugby shirts and mobile phones and new tariffs, and they're always trying to find people who want to engage with the marketing collateral that they've got. They actually came to us, I can't remember what it was, a while ago, and they said, we've actually got a specific need for someone to attend one of our red carpet events for, I think it was the Elton John premiere or something like that. We need a red carpet host to walk the red carpet and interview everybody, etc. Have you got anyone who'd be interested? We've got a budget of, hypothetically, let's say 15 grand. So we said, yeah, sure, we'll pop it on the platform. And what's really interesting about that is when you put it up, what they got in return were loads of people saying, I love Elton John and I've always supported Watford. Or I've got every single Elton John outfit, or I'm desperate to come and do this type thing. And they bid their fees down. And so when you want to do something, it's interesting that the sort of the brand love that we advocate is still part of that collaboration. When people really want to do something, they will.
Do you think you got some people pretending though that they loved Elton John because so that it could get that opportunity?
Possibly, but they only needed one, and they took the most authentic message. So, yes or no, it's a fine balance. I mean, I think it's a really interesting debating point. I think essentially it's push and pull marketing. When a brand goes to an influencer and says, I'd love to work with you, the control is in the influencer's hands. They say, cool, if you want to work with me, this is what it costs. And that's great. And there's some very, very good collaborations that can take place that way. But when a brand says, this is what we're doing, you come to us if you want to be a part of it, then as a creator or an influencer or whatever you want to term it, you've got to think very carefully about how you position yourself. So if you go in and say, brilliant, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to charge you 15 grand, well, there are going to be lots of other people who potentially will do it for less type thing. So I do think there is that brand love element. And it's exactly the same with the gifting element that we create, which is that where it's very self-policing is that the collaboration is that you will get access to the brand that you love, and in return you'll talk about it. And if you don't talk about it, then you're not really much value to us on the platform when we remove the keys to the whole. So we don't need you as a member anymore, and therefore there's a lot of self-policing. There's no point in me bidding on Polly Pocket or whatever it is, because I've got no interest in putting on my things. I only really want to talk about the things that I love, and therefore I will connect with the brands who've got things that are interesting to me. The unwritten rule in all of this, actually, is that I think content creators now are increasingly savvy to the fact that they have to have a blend of content on their channel. If you just serve up paid content, I think you are in danger of alienating your audience.
It's not just that, you mess up your algorithm.
Well,
you can't, it's just not feasible to just do ads. We have some creators that they don't do a ton of organic content, and then they get loads of brand deals, and we have to actively be like, you have to space it out, and it's hard to say no when you're getting those deals.
For sure,
because no one knows what the shelf life is of a creator. Like it could be a year, 2 years, 10 years, no one knows. So we always say take the opportunities when they're there, but you're dead right, you can't just make an account now based on ads.
No. What we champion, I'd be interested in your view on this actually, is of course you should earn your money, and those are your commercial deals. You've got to talk about the things you love, and what we give you is the opportunity for your contra or your gifted deals. And actually increasingly, I think the people who are going to sit at the top of the tree of influence, in inverted commas, are those who actually also back, support and advocate causes. So we talk a lot about commercial, contra and cause, and when you get the blend of that right, your stock rises, your audience remains engaged, your audience grows, etc. But I think you're absolutely right. Just slapping up paid campaigns left, right, and centre. We don't go onto social media to be advertised to. We're happy to take it if people create content that we want to follow. But it's an organic playground where you are amused and entertained and informed.
There's a balancing act there, because I hear what you're saying. We don't go on social media to be advertised to, but we go on to social media to be influenced. We do go on there to see the people we love, see the people that especially when it comes to, say, like a beauty content creator. We have loads of beauty content creators on our books. Their fans go to them to see, the latest looks, tips, tricks, tutorials, whatever it may be. So there is an element of like, which mascara is she using? So in that aspect, no, they're not looking to be advertised. But in terms of what you said about my take on who will kind of like rise to the top when it comes to those creators, we tell every one of our creators, if you start promoting things that you do not believe in, whether the money's good or not, your fans will see through it immediately. The more you get paid, the more control the brand has. So the content that's going to get made is not going to be organic to your channel. So I completely agree. It's just a very hard balancing act between them making a living when they're doing it full time. And that's where someone like yourself, or a sports person who can do it as a side income, can say no very easily to it. Content creators, it's quite difficult to say no to things.
Yes, and that's where I begin to feel quite old, because I missed. I was already through out the other side, as it were, when sort of content creation became a full-time job. And I understand it, and I get it, and I see it on an everyday basis. Whether I think that the concept of the content creator has got ultimate longevity, I don't know. I mean, we're starting to see AI influencers appearing and things like that. I mean, it's going to get. I mean, the whole thing is an absolute minefield, and I hope I'm in a box long before any of that comes across my desk, type thing. But what I genuinely believe, and where I am very passionate around what we're doing at Room Unlocked, is it still fundamentally comes back to good brands and good people creating good collaborations.
That's what I love about the model as well, because we obviously work with so many agencies and brands, and I completely agree. There are so many brands spending an insane amount of money on poor results, poor engagement, poor authenticity. And the main thing is there's a lack of education within the industry of how to make it work, and that's what your platform does so well.
I think so. I think we offer a very alternative way of looking at it.
It is a very alternative way, for sure. Because I can imagine, because I've been on your website and seen some great case studies. But also I can imagine that, because we've seen it from gifted partnerships, if you will, the reach 9 times out of 10 doesn't compare to the macro creators out there that demand payment.
Well, it can do. It can do. I mean, we've got an example. I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but we did a very, very, astonishingly powerful campaign with Virgin Voyages, where they took 30 of our creators on a cruise, and they created 2,000 pieces of content between them in 4 days.
Those activations are great like that.
Extraordinary. And that's very much the tip of the iceberg. But I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a bit like trying to sort of define advertising by a single kind of metric. You can advertise very well or you can advertise very badly. And again, you can use influencers accordingly. You can work very well with some, and it may well be that macro is absolutely the right way to go, or it may be for a brand actually working with 100 micro is far more effective for them. There's a huge kind of sliding scale for it.
The best influencer strategy has a bit of everything.
Yeah, completely would agree with that.
And those brands that pay for a one-off macro creator to post once on their social media and then go, oh, it didn't work. Yeah. Well, it was never going to work.
No.
You have to have a balanced strategy from micro, macro, mid-level, gifted, paid.
Absolutely.
And it also needs to be long-term.
Always on is exactly what I was going to say. And I think influencers are, and we may disagree on this, and that'd be quite fun. I think a very small section of the influencer community are hugely effective at sales. I think influencers are a very, very good awareness tool.
I think they're better at awareness.
Yes,
right now.
If you're cutting the cake, the reason for using influencers, a larger slice would be awareness over sales.
Agreed. My rebuttal would be: isn't most marketing channels about awareness and then it trickles down to conversion?
You have to know what it is that you want to buy.
Yeah.
And so that's where it sort of all feeds top of the funnel stuff.
Yeah. I think the thing that social media, even away from influencers, just social media gives you is the analytics that no other platform can give you.
Yeah.
And that can make your conversion strategy moving forward way more effective.
Yes.
But I agree. There are a lot of creators, especially even, it's actually the macro creators who 9 times out of 10 are poor at conversions.
Yes.
Because they've got a lot of dead followers. They've got a lot of followers from different territories that are never going to buy that product.
Yeah.
So I always call those kind of following numbers just vanity metrics.
Yes.
Because they're not real when it comes to conversions. And that's why, I don't know if you've dabbled or seen much about TikTok Shop and things like that. You actually see a lot of the people performing well on there have far smaller audiences, far more engaged. Yeah. Kind of like the creators that you're.
And I think that the TikTok phenomenon is very interesting because what we have seen, I think, again, I sort of show my age, is the journey that we've been on with Room Unlocked is not only have we seen our creators moving across various social media tools. Yeah. So when we launched, Facebook was a thing, Twitter was still, very active for our members. It's now, we've had Snapchat for a little bit, a bit of Twitch. It's now all Instagram, but TikTok is exploding.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think has happened is that brands have gone from basically buying their way onto a grid post. So they are, I'll give you an example in a moment, but they are, at the beginning, they were like, we want you to say this and position it accordingly, and this is the image we want to see on your post. And now what they're saying is, we want to plug into the stories you're telling, and we want you to tell we want you to tell your audience why you love our brand. And so they have ceded a lot of that kind of control. I'll give you a fascinating kind of sort of analogy of a brand that we work with. It's a chip brand. And I did not build Room Unlocked to work with chip brands, but they came to us and said, we love what you're doing. Yeah. We want to see whether we can engage some influencers on your platform. And we said, well, cool, let's go for it. And they were like, brilliant. And what we want them to do is to create the dish where the chips are at 45 degrees to the ketchup with the peas of a certain shade. We were just, oh my God, please don't worry about it. What we said to them is, we've got this incredible celebrity golf opportunity. You can have a stand on one of these celebrity golf. It was a 9-hole pitch and putt in Chiswick. Give chips to everybody that comes through, make an absolute boatload of content, have a real giggle. And they were like, no, we're much more interested in chips on a plate at 45 degrees. And I this was a while ago. I think there is a real willingness. I think there was a real reluctance at that point. But I think there is a real. Is there a willingness? Is it a point of friction? I don't know. I think some brands are very happy to throw themselves into the hands of creators and say, go for it. Others are probably required to be far more careful, and others haven't quite got that.
And if you look at the brands that have done it well, Gymshark, for example, they let their creators get on with it. Yeah. And they do huge activations, like they just did one in Manchester a few weeks ago, which some of our creators were at, to make all that of amazing content, like the golf day that you presented. And if you only have to look at the best brands doing influencer to know that you've got to give the creators the room to do what they do, basically. Because it doesn't work. Because if you direct creators too much on their own page, people they don't just know it's an ad, they hate that it's an ad.
Yes.
So then they just scroll or they don't engage, and then that's what's the point in that completely. So I guess this is quite a big question, but what is your opinion then of the paid influencer market?
Well, I think it's definitely here to stay. I think it's a bit like going back to that advertising analogy. I think some are doing it unbelievably well and are really engaging in how they work. It's phenomenal content, and they are doing remarkably powerful things for the brands that they're working with. I think some are doing it incredibly badly. Yeah. So it's not a hugely scientific answer for you. Some are great, some aren't. What I think is really interesting, and I sort of have seen this a little bit, is that I think the next iteration potentially, and I can't remember who it was KSI or one of Logan Paul or somebody, they're beginning to now describe themselves as founders. And where I think the next real sort of big meaty success stories are going to appear is where influencers and brands not just collaborate over content, but they are intertwined. They are, the influencer is part of the business. Yeah. And you look at Prime, which is an extraordinary example of what unbelievable hype numbers can do online, and you just bottle up. I mean, I've got a 10-year-old boy who will walk across London to find a green bottle of Prime, which disappoints me intensely. But I think there is something very interesting in that, and I think back to the P. Diddy Ciroc vodka, which was, it must be 15 years old now, and they said, we'll pay you £1 million a year to be the face of the brand, $1 million a year to be the face of Ciroc vodka. And he stopped and he thought about it. He said, no, bollocks, give me 10% of the company and we'll go on this journey together. And every single party he walked into, he was clutching a bottle of Ciroc vodka, and he exited for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions. And I think that is, I think we will see a rise in influencers as business commodities over just content creators. Yeah, I think that's where it's going. Yeah. But I think it is it's a bit like anything really. I think those who are doing it really badly are spoiling it for those who are doing it really well.
Yeah.
The word we actually used to be called the influence room. That's what our original name was, and we removed the word influence because so many of our members.
I hate the word influencer.
Yeah. Well, it's toxic.
I prefer content creators.
Content creators,
far better. But then that doesn't cover everybody.
No.
You mentioned it's going off tangent a bit. You mentioned you have 2 young kids, right?
13 and 10. So relatively, 13 going on 16.
My wife and I had our first baby about 10 months ago, and I'm always interested to speak to other business owners who have kids.
Yeah.
How do you balance your work life, personal life, but how do you balance running a business, doing podcasting, and then kids?
I sincerely hope my wife won't listen to this because I think she'll have a very different opinion to I will. It's a very good question. So I was very, very lucky, I think, that when my kids were very young, I was heavily involved at Sky and I wasn't working what I would call regular hours. Now that was a real bonus in that. So I was basically at home Monday to Friday, and then I'd disappear on a weekend to go and cover the sport, which meant that I have probably been to more ballet recitals and swimming lessons and the most parents get the chance to do, or working parents anyway. Now it's different, and my daughter's at secondary school. My son is sort of heavily involved in school, as you'd expect, and it is really difficult. So we were chatting in the lift actually before we came up about how much broadcasting I do now. That is the element that's fallen by the wayside because I don't want to be away from home. I used to do 42 weekends a year.
So is that one of the main elements of why you're not doing broadcasting anymore?
Well, there are a number of elements. I think I think being 43 and very pale male still doesn't. I get it, and I wouldn't challenge it. I've done 20 years of it.
Yeah. Did Good Bad The Rugby have anything to do with not being able to do as much punditry? Because you're a lot freer in what you can
we are a lot
say
freer. Good Bad Rugby is a sort of a hobby that we love that's become a bit of a beast.
Yeah.
So my life now is chaotic. I mean, properly chaotic, but I absolutely love it like that.
Yeah.
So, yesterday I was doing presentation coaching with quite a high profile individual. I've had meetings this morning about Rugby World Cup in France. I'm obviously doing your podcast. I've got sales calls when I get back. I've got an interview with a new hire that we're trying to make. It's very, very all over the place, and I quite like that. How does that feed into the family? It's very feast or famine. So my kids would say that I work very, very hard. And I would say, but I'm free to be able to make the big things, so I can go and watch my daughter play netball.
Flexibility.
I've got flexibility. Yeah. But also, I'm 43. I'm quite enjoying the race and the chase and the hustle, and I don't think you feel that forever. It's not easy, but I am very conscious of it. I try very hard to be in the right place at the right time for all parties. So we'll see.
We've got about 20 minutes left, and I'm going to use this to talk about rugby.
Okay.
It's my podcast, and I want to talk about rugby. Okay. So I don't care if anybody else is listening, because it's
we have a podcast which is about rugby, and we hate talking about rugby. So this is it's sort of inverted.
Does go off tangent quite a lot?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
That's a good first question. How do you wrangle those two when you're trying to? Because it seems like Mike's a lot easier to keep.
Oh yeah, but so Mike is a smiling assassin. Right. He'll happily knife you in the back. Hask will knife you in the front. It is great fun, and we've been on a hell of a journey actually we've done it for nearly 5 years now.
Really, God,
which is a long time to listen to Hask repeating the same stories, but he sort of varies them every so often. We are 3 very different peas from 3 very different pods, and yet we have become incredibly good mates, and we're heavily in business together now. We've not only got the podcast, but we've got a stake in a production company together, and actually we're bringing out a gin as well, which is quite good fun. And that's probably a story for another day. But we're actually going to try and raise a lot of money for players who need some help, because I think the game is creaking a little bit at the moment, but I think solutions are not too far away. Yeah, I mean, and no day is boring and no day is the same. And we will sit down. The person I feel most sorry for is our producer, who will spend.
I was going to say, how do they keep you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they've given up. They will spend many happy hours crafting a beautiful script and a production running order, and they'll get us all in the right, and the whole thing just slides off the tray.
Your clipboard. Do you ever actually get through?
Probably got a penis drawn on it by one of the other two. Do we ever get through? It's funny because actually, for those of your audience who don't know, we're a bit of a man cave that has a love of rugby. Yeah. We're not a rugby podcast. Mike Tindall obviously has got an extraordinary story. He won the World Cup at the age of 24. Yeah. He's married the Queen's granddaughter. He's very successful in his own right, public speaker. He's got his own businesses, etc. And actually, he's very, very dialed into the game. He is a real lover of the sport. Hask brought out an article day before yesterday, which I think we've all known for years, but it was interesting to hear him say it, which is that he has got probably high-level ADHD, and he has absolutely made the most of it. He is now an award-winning author. He's a DJ. He's a dad. He is a fitness influencer. I mean, it's just you've never ever seen a diary like his. It's just a car crash of colour and meetings. He's doing his own tour. He's doing comedy. He actually, we keep both of us saying, Tins and I keep saying, you've got to calm down, do less, 4 more. He's
just had a baby as well.
He's had a baby, Bodhi. He's going for Dad of the Year. Nothing that he does is sort of half baked. But yeah, it's just great fun. Honestly, it's 3 really. We always say that we would probably meet for a beer once a week, even if we weren't doing the pod, because it's just 3 very different perspectives. We bounce off each other very well. My role is to play the kind of beta male, even though everyone knows I run the show. And they can never admit it publicly, but privately they do. One day I'll release the tapes.
Yeah, exactly. You talked then about the solutions to rugby not being too far off. Yeah. What is happening with the game right now? You've got players moving to France. I saw Jack Willis has just signed till 2026. Yeah. It's
what is the solution? Well, the game is rugby is a relatively small goldfish bowl. Yeah. Is the honest truth of it. The World Cup is the 3rd biggest sporting event on the planet, and France in 6 months or 5 months to 4 months time, whatever it is, will be spectacular. And therefore, at the top of the game, the sport looks unbelievable. But the reality is that the club game and the layers underneath, essentially World Cups, Lions and Six Nations, those levels have to scrap for their pound of flesh. Yeah. The problem with the sport really is there are far too many voices at the top table, and there are loads of competing factions, and as a result, everybody is fighting for their own slice of the cake, and nothing is moving forwards very quickly. which is thoroughly depressing. You wrap that in a sort of layer of health and safety worries. The concussion lawsuit is not going away, and that is very concerning. And you begin to look at a sport basically that was founded in the late 1800s and hasn't really progressed as it should. I mean, professionalism is only 30 years old, or whatever it is, 28 years old. We haven't made a very good fist of it. I think the real regret, from my perspective, is that when COVID came along, that wasn't the kind of control-alt-delete moment that it should have been. They should have just said, right, everybody stop what you're doing. Let's sit down now and rebuild a professional game. Has much changed
since COVID?
No, nothing's changed. What's happened is that the bailout money that was pumped into the Premiership by CVC, or this sort of huge venture capital firm, that's been spent on survival, not growth. The Southern Hemisphere game is withering on the vine. I think if you look at the majority of competitions in the sport right now, very few of them you would say are better than they were 10 years ago. Rugby World Cup, yes. Six Nations, yes. Women's game,
I used
great.
to watch Super Rugby all the time.
I mean, Disciple, breakfast, it was brilliant.
But now, I
couldn't even tell you who's in it now.
Yeah.
I don't know who's playing. I don't know where to watch it.
What about the English game, in particular the Prem?
Yeah.
Do we need less teams? Do we need to go down like the Ireland route? Or is that not feasible?
I don't think they'll get down to 4. So Ireland is... The Ireland model is very successful because the players... central contracts is the way to sort the macro out. And that's why you are seeing New Zealand forever remain strong. Oh, I still say that. New Zealand and Ireland, they are a triangle of sort of success where everything from the school game to the All Blacks is linked. And so the All Black head coach can say to an 18-year-old kid who's playing centre, actually, I think you'll be better on the wing, and that's where I see your future in Super Rugby and then for the All Blacks. So you can make those changes. In England, it is still, whether they say it publicly or not, there are still major friction points between the club and union. It's better than it ever has been, but it's not joined up. We did a show the other day with Anthony Watson, who I think is one of the most talented players this country's had in 10 or 15 years.
He doesn't know if he's got a club.
He doesn't. Well, not only does he not know if he's got a club for next season, he's been forced to move from Bath to Leicester on a 30% of his previous salary. He's been made to play when he's injured. He's missed chunks of his career through snapping his ACL and rupturing his Achilles. This is one of the most prime players in the country. He's just sort of a piece of meat.
He's a similar age to me. He's about 28, right? 28, 29.
Something like that, yeah.
I remember watching on like a computer screen in our school these really old, grainy YouTube videos of this amazing guy with big hair running down the wing.
Yeah.
It was Anthony Watson.
Yeah. I know. Well, I mean, I think it's a real shame that I feel a bit negative saying it. I do think it is going to sort itself out. Yeah. I think they will end up with a franchised Premiership. I think it'll be 10 teams. So they will buy out all the clubs.
Right.
They will centralise the whole pot. And those that then want to buy their clubs back can do so probably on a preferential rate. And then you'll have a 10-team league with central control, which means that everybody will grow together. And the problem that you've got at the moment is all the clubs are off doing their own kit deal and their own front of shirt sponsorship and their own beer deal. And it's much more valuable to say to Canterbury, do you want the entire Premiership? You're going to have all 10 teams. And you say to Ford, do you want to sponsor the front of every single shirt? Do you want to own shirt sponsorship in the Premiership? They will write a much bigger check because of the cut through that they're going to get. So I think it will get itself. So the problem with rugby is that because there are so many voices, it just moves at a glacial pace. But yeah, don't give up.
What's that conundrum? How do you fix that conundrum between the players aren't getting paid enough, but there's not enough money in the game?
Well, that's what we're going through at the moment. Is that player wages are plummeting, and in Wales, it's infinitely worse than it is in England right now. And it's not only that wages are falling; it's also that the number of playing spots has fallen dramatically as well. So we've lost 2 clubs, which is 80 opportunities for top level players to ply their trade has evaporated, and that's why Jack Willis is now. Moved from Wasps, who went into administration, over to Toulouse.
But it's not just moved; he's extended.
Yeah,
that's a big. I know why he had to go out because Wasps disappeared, but he didn't have to stay.
But he won't have had the offer to come back that he's looking for.
And he's had injury after injury.
He's had injury after injury.
His family.
And I think Toulouse offer you a 3-year deal. They're the biggest club in the world, bar probably Leinster as a province. But what his signing has done is it is going to put the pressure on the RFU and this exceptional circumstances rule. So English players are not allowed to play outside of England if they want to play for the country, unless there are exceptional circumstances, which I think everybody knows means it ain't going to happen. But I know Steve Borthwick is desperate to be able to pick whoever he wants, but the clubs won't do it because if the exodus then really turns into a flood, then suddenly the Premiership is getting even weaker.
But do you think that England can compete with the likes of Ireland, France, all these big nations if we can't pick from whoever we want? If Steve can't pick whoever he wants, can we compete against that? Because if we can't pick a Jack Willis...
I don't think the overseas players, players plying their trade overseas, is actually the whole problem.
Okay.
The system doesn't work. I mean, you look at something like the Ireland team who played England in the Grand Slam, decided 13 of those 23 all play for Leinster. They eat together, train together.
Andy Good called that Ireland team in blue.
But the reality is they know each other inside out exceptionally well. They train together every single day. And you listen to someone like Mike Tindall talk, and he says, when you get to that level, the ability to know what body shape your inside centre is holding will determine what you do. And when you are dealing with, percentiles in terms of performance, that is a massive step forward. So, overseas problem, it's not going to help England's cause, but, we've got huge player numbers. We've got the richest union in the world. England will, I was going to say, always be competitive. I'm not sure the France game demonstrates that. They'll always be able to put a team out that can, face the right direction, but they aren't going to be able to hit the levels of 2003, etc., without a fairly seismic overhaul of what they're trying to do.
And because it's been 4 years now since we've actually been competitive. So it's been since the 29 World Cup that we've actually.
We won the Six Nations in 2020.
Was that the COVID?
That was the COVID one. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it has been a relatively slow slide. Yeah, and. That's hugely frustrating. I think there's been a lot of smoke and mirrors around, Eddie Jones and all that kind of thing. I mean, I don't think Eddie Jones was the reason that England have slid off the position that they were. Ireland have got a golden generation right now. France have finally sorted themselves out. New Zealand are always strong, but not as strong as they have been. Yeah. South Africa will always knock 7 bells out of you and see if you can stand up to the test. Wales have gone from Grand Slam champions to losing at home to Georgia in the space of 3 years. The top of the tree it's very, very competitive now, and England haven't fired the shots in any way, shape, or form that they'd have liked to. But it
comes from the club game, though, right?
Well,
so if you look at that,
I think that's a very interesting point. I think the demise of Europe, actually, which was the perfect kind of springboard between Premiership. Premiership is level 3, and Test match rugby is level 1. European rugby was the perfect sort of interlude. That has withered on the vine. That is not the competition it was. And so you're now asking English players to jump from level 3 to level 1. The England team had 8 or 9 different clubs represented. Ireland has 3. Those are the marginal gains that mean you are going to win or lose. I think at that level when the margins are so tight.
Who have you got for the World Cup?
God, I wouldn't put a pound on any of it. I think honestly, if I had to, I'd back South Africa.
Really?
And that is simply because...
I did not expect that. I really expected you to say Ireland or New Zealand.
No. South Africa are the perfect World Cup team because they just hit you until you break. And, the World Cup is 2 parts. The pool stages are all about playing rugby and getting bonus points. And the quarterfinals are just about protecting your try line. And no one will protect their try line as frantically and as manically as South Africa will. I don't think they are... honestly, it could be any one of New Zealand, France, South Africa, Ireland. I worry about Ireland. Ireland have got the best system. 1 or 2 question marks around Johnny Sexton. I think his injury potentially is quite bad, and that is a huge loss. Not necessarily just in terms
They've
of what
said
he
he's not going to
plays.
play until the World Cup, right?
Well, but we'll see. Hopefully. I think France are phenomenal, but if you lose Dupont, there's so much rugby to be played. They've each got 4 warm-up games before you even get to the tournament. There's 5 pool matches. There's, will Dupont be fit at a World Cup final?
Yeah.
God, I hope so, because he is the Messi of rugby right now. But there's so much that's going to go on between now and then. And then you just throw into the pot the absolute lottery of red cards at this point. It's very, very difficult to pick a winner because there are so many intangibles. But that also makes it a phenomenal tournament. And it will be an incredible 2 months of colour and late summer sun. But I think rugby fans sort of are going to have to hold on quite tight and be prepared that, only one is left holding the pot and there's a lot of disappointment for everybody else.
And do you think England actually have a chance?
I think England will be way better than we saw in the Six Nations. I think they've got a very, very favourable pool draw.
Yes, yeah. Quite a good run to the semis, really.
Quite a good run to the semis. And then anything can happen.
Yeah.
Steve Borthwick is a very, very, very astute coach. Kevin Sinfield is learning rapidly what it takes at the top level. And do not underestimate, there are 2 guys coming into that England setup. Alan Walters at Leicester is the fitness guru, who's the most mad, lovely, charismatic Welshman who will really lift player morale, performance, fitness levels, etc. And Richard Wigglesworth, who will sort of take on the attack.
Is he coming in to do attack?
Yeah, so he's joining full time. I think England will be... Do you know, funnily enough, and I've sort of said this a couple of times before, it's no bad thing going into a tournament with people not really looking at you right now. And you see it. I mean, even in 2019, South Africa lost to New Zealand in the pools. You don't want to go in as...
They were terrible, like 18 months out.
Awful. And then you look at Argentina, who lost to Japan in the World Cup pool stages. You look at England, who won the cricket T20. They lost to Ireland in the pool stages. What you need to be as a team when you arrive at the tournament is 80% of what you want to be at the end. And my worry for Ireland is I think they are 98% of what they can be at the end of the tournament. And so there is more of a danger of them dropping performance levels than raising them.
They've made it a habit of peaking between World Cups.
They are very, very good now. They are, and they are very, very good now. And they have got so much strength and depth. The rugby that they are playing is so much broader in perspective than it was. So I think, but they've got a hell of a group. South Africa and Scotland. I mean, Scotland, for Christ's sake, can take chunks out of anybody.
They're playing a lot better than they've ever have as well.
Even Italy can take the chunk out of somebody on their day. So it's, as I said, go back to your question, I wouldn't put a pound on anybody.
No, it's going to be a great tournament, though.
Hope so.
Very much looking forward to it. I'm going to Lille and Lyon for 3 games each.
We're on a cruise in Marseille.
Yeah, I've heard about
what the hell we're doing, but 4,000 rugby fans.
On the cruise?
On the cruise, yeah. Off to Ibiza. Don't ask.
I'll wrap this up with a question that I'm asking. Well, actually, it's the first time I've asked anybody this. What's your biggest lesson from building a business?
God, that is a very good question. My biggest lesson is probably, I don't know if it's a lesson or a motto, keep going. Keep going and stay alive. So we are, I don't know whether that's a very good answer or not, but the number of times as a business owner that you doubt and that you want to quit and throw it in the bin, and people tell you what you're doing is wrong, and clients get upset, and you just got to keep going. And I think that probably is the lesson I've learned more than any other. Trying to grow a business, we're 5.5, 6 years old. We've had COVID and a world war and a recession and a banking run, and the housing market's collapsing and no one's spending any money. I keep saying at some point we'll get a tailwind and then we're off and running. I think resilience and persistence and belief are almost the most important elements of running a business. I don't know whether you...
No, I completely agree. I think that one of the biggest things you need in any form of life is just to keep going. When you're doubting yourself or when stuff goes wrong. The amount of people that if they just kept doing their business for another 3 or 4 months. I know it's easier said than done.
It's the diamond in the mine, isn't it?
Exactly.
Keep going.
Exactly.
And we keep... the number of times that I've literally had my head in my hands and an email comes in and suddenly there's that deal that I thought had gone is bad. Something always comes along if you're prepared to keep going.
Somebody in my team said to me a few weeks ago, like, do you have good days or bad days? And I was like, not really. There's good things and bad things every single day when you're working in business or running a business or whatever. And if you can just get through it and enjoy the highs and don't hate the lows.
I have good 5 minutes and then a bad 5 minutes, and then a bad 5 minutes and a good 5 minutes. And it's, to have a good day. That would be a real treat.
Alex, thanks so much.
Great fun. Thanks, Emilio. Thank you.